remember that day like it was yesterday. I walked into the office, holding my application tightly, ready to start a new chapter. I had perfect credit, a steady job, solid references from my last 2 landlords. Everything was in order. I thought finally I'd found a place to call home, but the landlord barely glanced at my papers. Instead, he looked me up and down, his eyes cold and quick to judge. Then, with a sharp tone, he said, "Sorry, the apartment's already taken." I blinked, confused. The for rent sign was still hanging right outside the building. I could see it with my own eyes. How could it be taken already? I tried to protest, to explain that I was serious and ready to move in, but he cut me off. Like I said, it's gone. I felt the weight of those words crash down on me. It wasn't just the rejection, it was the way he said it. The way he looked at me like I didn't belong. I knew, deep down, it wasn't about the apartment, it was me, my skin color. That was the truth he wouldn't say aloud. My heart shattered. I wanted to scream, to demand justice. But instead I walked away quietly, alone, hurt, angry, but something inside me snapped. A fire was lit. He had no idea who he was dealing with. I whispered to myself as I left, "He doesn't know who he just messed with." And from that moment, I vowed things would change. I want you to know where I came from, because that moment, the rejection, wasn't the first time life tried to hold me back. I was raised by a single mother who worked harder than anyone I knew. She had a quiet strength, the kind that doesn't make noise but moves mountains. She taught me one thing above all: never let anyone else decide your worth. No matter what they say or do, your value is yours alone. Growing up, money was tight. We didn't have much, but my mom made sure I understood the power of hard work and education. I watched her juggle jobs, bills, and still managed to keep a smile on her face. I wanted to make her proud. I wanted to make a better life for both of us. So when I went to college, I worked 2 jobs. I cleaned offices at night, and waited tables on weekends. I studied finance during the day. I wanted to understand money, not just how to make it, but how to use it wisely. I took extra classes in real estate, dreaming of owning property one day, not just for me, but to create places where people could feel safe, where people like me wouldn't be judged before they even walked in the door. It wasn't easy. I saved every penny I could. I skipped vacations, sold things I loved, and lived simply. People around me didn't always understand. They said, "Why work so hard? Why dream so big?" But I knew I had to keep going. That landlord's rejection, it wasn't just a door slammed shut, it was a spark. It reminded me why I worked so hard. It reminded me of the dream I'd carried for years, quietly growing inside me. This time my dream wasn't just about owning property, it was a mission, to change the way things worked, to make sure no one else would feel the pain I felt that day. And so I began to plan. After that awful day, I couldn't stop thinking about the landlord. Who was he really? What kind of person shuts the door on someone just because of the color of their skin? I started digging. I looked up the apartment complex records online. It didn't take long to find out he didn't just own the one building. He owned the whole complex and a few others nearby. That was when I realized how much power he had in the neighborhood. But power didn't mean respect. As I searched, I found complaints from past tenants. Stories of discrimination, threats of eviction, apartments left in terrible shape. People who had lived there talked about broken heaters in winter, leaky pipes, and landlords who never fixed anything. And when tenants spoke up, he pushed them out. But the man was clever. Every time he found a way to dodge real consequences. Lawsuits got dropped. Complaints got ignored. No one ever stopped him for long. I sat back and thought, how many people like me had he turned away? How many had been hurt by his rules and his ugly views? I felt anger bubble up inside me, but I didn't want to fight him with rage. That wouldn't win. Instead, I chose to fight smart. I told myself, if he thinks he can keep people like me out, I'm going to make sure he can't. I started making a plan, not to break him down, but to build something better, something stronger. The game had changed. I wasn't just a tenant anymore. I was a challenger. After learning everything I could about the landlord, I knew it was time to act, but this wasn't going to be a quick fight. It was a slow, quiet battle. One I would win with patience and smart moves. I started working extra hours. I picked up side jobs and took on freelance projects. Every dollar I earned, I saved. I cut back on everything unnecessary. No nights out, no new clothes, just focus. At the same time, I studied everything about real estate, more than I already knew. I read books, joined online groups, and watched videos. But the most important thing was finding a mentor, someone who had been through it all and could guide me. One day, I met her at a local business seminar. She was successful, kind, and believed in me. She helped me understand the legal steps, the paperwork, the money side of buying property. She showed me how to stay hidden if I needed to, because I knew the landlord wouldn't want to sell if he found out who I was. Then, the big break. I found out the landlord was in trouble. Deep trouble. He owed a lot in debts and taxes. Rumors said he wanted to sell the complex, but quietly, without attracting attention. He didn't want anyone to know, especially not the community or the press. I put together a plan, using a front company, a small LLC I created for this purpose. I made an offer. It was fair, clean, and fast. No drama, no extra conditions, just a good deal. At first the landlord hesitated, but when he realized how much he owed and how little time he had, he agreed. Maybe he thought it was just another buyer, just another sale, but he didn't know who was behind that company. The very place he refused to rent to me, the place where he shut me out because of who I am, would soon be mine. The day of the contract signing finally arrived. I felt a mix of nerves and calm. This was it, the moment I had worked so hard for. I walked into the room wearing a sharp suit, the kind that says, "I belong here." The landlord was already there, waiting with that same cold look I remembered from the first time I met him. The second he saw me, his face changed, his eyes widened, and his mouth fell open just a little. "You again," he said, disbelief thick in his voice. I smiled softly and said, "Yes." Without a word, I reached into my briefcase and pulled out the final paperwork. I slid it across the table toward him. He looked down and saw my name, the company's name, my name clearly printed on every page. His expression went from shock to silence. He couldn't believe it. The woman he had refused to rent to was now the one buying the entire complex. For a long moment he just stared. Then, almost mechanically, he picked up the pen and signed the papers. The deal was done. I owned the whole place. My voice trembled, not from fear, but from the weight of everything that had brought me here. I looked him straight in the eyes and said, "I wasn't good enough to rent here, but I'm more than good enough to own it." He said nothing, just stared at me as if trying to understand what had happened. But I didn't need his approval anymore. I was no longer a victim, I was a victor, and this was only the beginning. The first thing I did after the sale was clear: evict the landlord from the one unit he kept for himself. It was only fair. After all, he had made life hard for so many people in this building. It was time for a fresh start. Next, I hired a management team, people who believed in fairness and respect. I wanted the staff to reflect the community I was building. Diverse, professional, and ready to listen. The units were in bad shape. Years of neglect had left them worn down. So, I invested in renovations, new paint, updated plumbing, safer locks, better lighting. I made sure every tenant would feel safe and proud to call their apartment home. I opened the doors to everyone. No matter their background, race, or situation, they were welcome. This was a place where respect wasn't just expected, it was mandatory. Former tenants started coming to me, thanking me for what I was doing. They told me stories of what they'd endured under the old landlord: broken promises, unfair evictions, and endless frustration. It was heartbreaking to hear, but it also strengthened my resolve. I knew this was just the beginning. To help even more, I set up a fund specifically to support single mothers and students struggling to find housing. They deserve a chance, just like I did. My dream of owning property wasn't just about wealth or status anymore. It was about building something real, something that made a difference. What started as a painful rejection became a powerful mission, and now I'm proud to say my dream is bigger than I ever imagined. Months had quietly slipped by since I took ownership of the apartment complex. Life had moved forward, slowly but surely, as I worked to change things for the better. I'd been focused on making the place a home for people who deserved respect and fairness. The old landlord, the man who had once rejected me so cruelly, had disappeared from my thoughts. Until one day, he suddenly appeared. When I saw him walking toward the building, my breath caught. The confident, arrogant man I remembered was nowhere to be found. Instead, the man before me looked diminished, worn down by life in ways only hardship can do. His shoulders were slumped, his steps hesitant, and his eyes lacked the cold pride they once held. It was as if time and troubles had chipped away every bit of the arrogance he wore like armor. Rumors had reached me before that day. Stories of how he'd lost almost everything. The properties he once owned had slipped through his fingers. Bad debts had piled up, legal battles drained his money, and his once protected empire was crumbling. No safety net remained to catch his fall. Now, here he was, standing at my doorstep. I watched him carefully. His clothes were worn but clean, and there was a nervous energy in the way he shifted his weight. He cleared his throat and spoke in a quiet, almost broken voice. "Do you have any open units? I need a place to stay." Hearing those words, my heart twisted. Part of me flared up with anger, a sharp, burning flame fueled by everything he had put me and others through. The memory of his cruel rejection echoed loud in my mind. How many others like me had he turned away? How many dreams had he crushed with a single look or a cold word? But even as that anger blazed, another feeling crept in, a gentler, softer emotion. Maybe it was pity. Maybe it was a quiet understanding that life's hardships come for us all, no matter who we are. Sometimes, the people who hurt us the most end up broken themselves. I paused for a long moment, studying the man who had once shut me out so mercilessly. I saw not the enemy anymore, but a human being, flawed, fallen, but still human. Then I smiled. Not the smile of victory or revenge, but a calm, steady smile filled with strength and grace. "We have something available," I said. My voice firm but kind. "But here, we don't discriminate. Everyone follows the same rules." His head dropped slightly, the proud mask finally cracking. There were no excuses, no anger, no demands, just silence and embarrassment. I offered him a unit, not a gift, not a punishment, just a place like any other tenants. He signed a strict lease with clear terms. No special favors, no exceptions. The power had shifted, and I was the one in control now. The tables had turned completely. But even with all that power, I chose dignity over revenge. Because real strength isn't about tearing someone down or making them smaller, it's about lifting others up, even those who have wronged you. I wanted to prove something bigger than winning or paying someone back. I wanted to show that kindness and fairness can be stronger than hatred and cruelty. This story isn't just about me buying a building, it's about refusing to be defined by hate or rejection. It's about how racism tries to close doors, but resilience always opens new ones. If you face a no, don't let it stop you. Don't let a closed door decide your future. Build your own door, stand tall, work hard, and own your story, because your worth is never up for debate. I am proud, not just for what I own now, but for what I stood for throughout this journey. The journey that began with heartbreak and rejection but grew into something powerful and beautiful. This is my story, one of strength, of change, and of hope. If this story moved you, please don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Your support means the world. Share this video with someone who needs a reminder of their worth and strength, and remember, sometimes the best revenge isn't anger or hatred. It's building a better world, rising above, and showing that kindness and resilience are stronger than hate. Thank you for watching, stay strong, and keep believing in yourself.